So, Disney's live action Mulan was absolute cow shit. Mulan. But seriously, it's disgusting, it's horrid, and I don't actively hate many movies. I don't even hate any of the other Disney live actions. I dislike some of them, but Mulan is just a slap in the face to the legacy of the animated film and everyone who has ever watched it. Even if the animated film never existed, this Mulan would still be putrid. Now, I've done plenty of hating on this film in the past, and I can only do so much, so in this video we're just gonna start from the ground up and build a good Disney live-action Mulan film. We can't simply just make adjustments to fix the Mulan film that unfortunately does exist, because it's intrinsically horrid and we need to start over. If you at all are concerned about why that film is so poopy, you can watch some of the countless YouTube videos that break down why it is very much not good on so many levels. It's not just bad as an adaptation, homage, or celebration of the animated film, but it also failed in its attempt to please Chinese audiences by trying to be more authentic, accurate, and respectful of the culture when it really wasn't any of those things. Probably because the entire filmmaking crew was white, and the film is just saturated with extremely poor creative decisions, is badly directed, horribly edited, emotionally hollow as can be. It turns Mulan into a superhero who is a natural-born warrior with no flaws, so it isn't much of a sacrifice for the character to go off and fight in the war. It removes most of the essential elements and iconography from the animated film, including the goddamn dragon and the incredible songs. I could go on, but trust me, it bad. So, let's cleanse our minds of that ugly piece of poo and imagine an actual good version that we will never get and will only exist within our shared delusions. Okay, first and foremost, we have to find someone with actual charisma and charm to play Mulan. The actor must be of Chinese descent, ideally no older than 25, preferably younger, and the unfortunate thing is that I don't really know anyone who fits the bill because Chinese people are barely represented in Hollywood, so yeah, we'd have to do an open casting call, but for the sake of this video, we're gonna cast Teresa Ting, who seems to fit the bill, though I suspect she may be on the older side, but whatever, she looks the part. She's trained in martial arts, and I've only seen her act in a clip from Law and Order, yet in that little clip she had more personality than Miss Liu Yifei could muster in the entire film of Mulan 2020. I can be mean to Liu Yifei, by the way, she's problematic. So yeah, Teresa Ting as Mulan, or at least that's the vibe we're going for here. As for bisexual icon Li Shang, and yes, there will be a Li Shang in this version, we're gonna go with Remy Hai from Spider-Man Far From Home, and what the hell, he's 36? Wow. He played a teenager in Spider-Man recently, so like, whatever, he's the vibe we want. As for the director, I think it'd benefit the film for it to come from the lens of someone who's Chinese, a woman, and a good director. But yeah, especially having the lived experience of being both Chinese and a woman would intrinsically provide a perspective that could only make the film more nuanced and authentic. I'm thinking someone along the lines of Chloe Zhao or Cathy Yan. Chloe Zhao is an Oscar-winning director known for indie films including the poetic, intimate, Academy Award-winning Nomadland, and she also did Eternals, which I didn't watch due to Marvel fatigue, and it didn't get great reviews, but from what I saw, it looked well made. I just know she is more than capable of bringing the heart and soul to the film. Cathy Yan directed Birds of Prey, and she is very skilled at creating a stylish, palpable energy that radiates from every moment. And she's great when it comes to fight scenes. She generally has a very unique perspective and infuses her films with personality, so I'd love to see that type of flair applied to a more serious, dramatic, epic type of film. And that brings me to what the tone and style of the film should be. The reason that Mulan has more potential than any other live-action adaptation is that it could really lean into the drama, the emotion, and the battle sequences more than the animated film was able to, and fully deliver upon a live-action, epic Chinese war fantasy. The animated film was definitely epic and filled with emotion, but it also embraced the expectations and sensibilities of Disney animation, and it mixed in a lot of silly, comedic, abstract elements that definitely work for a cartoon, but could be a bit trickier to translate into live action. So I think a live action film should really lean into the advantages of a more lifelike medium, and that way you'd have it be a companion piece to the animated film, an alternative to it that allows you to experience it through a more mature, complex lens, and they can coexist side by side until the end of time, and which one you watch depends on what mood you're in. That should be the case for every live action adaptation. But I by no means think a live-action Mulan should be all doom and gloom. I just definitely think it should be rooted more in drama. So, where would this leave the iconic musical sequences and the other elements like Mushu? As for the musical sequences, I could definitely understand the argument that they should be cut in favor of being more grounded and maybe replaced with instrumentals. After all, Cinderella is probably the best Disney live action and it wasn't a musical. But I think the songs are just too intrinsic to the DNA and legacy of Disney's Mulan, and simply just having nods to them or having instrumentals play could work. However, it just reminds us of great songs instead of actually hearing them. So, f*** it. We're here to embrace Mulan in all its glory, and we want this thing to be awesome. We're making it a musical, and you may be wondering how that would work in a more serious, dramatic version of the film, but that's where I think this film could be very refreshing, interesting, and set itself apart from the animation without contradicting it. The musical sequences here will be more in the vein of Les Mis, and the arrangements of the songs will be more sweeping, epic, operatic, and dramatic, with a beautiful choral ensemble to add to that vibe. And if you don't think that would work for more upbeat songs like Make a Man Out of You, once again, look to the Les Mis soundtrack. There are plenty of upbeat songs there, but they don't take away from the dramatic tone. And I just think you could also do some really innovative stuff with the arrangements and production and include more Chinese sounds and sensibilities. It could be really cool and would make it easy to not compare the songs to how they were presented in the animated film. Which soundtrack you listen to would once again depend on your mood. If you're feeling more jovial and fun, listen to the animated soundtrack. If you're feeling more emotional and dramatic, listen to the live-action one. Okay, so what about Mushu? Could he fit into a more serious live-action film? Of course I'm including Mushu, I'm not insane. One of the coolest aspects of a live-action Mulan film would be seeing a photorealistic little pet dragon. But of course he would have to translate and adjust to fit this more grounded world, so I'm sorry, he won't be talking in this film. He'll be by Mulan's side throughout her entire journey, and she'll be talking to him, and he'll be able to understand her, and he'll still emote, but I don't think he should speak for many reasons. I think that one reason 2015 Cinderella was much more digestible than the other live-action adaptations was because the animals couldn't speak. Jacques and Gus Gus were there, and Ella could still talk to them, and they seemed to understand her, but if they would have opened their mouths to speak, suddenly we're in a very different movie. And especially for a film like Mulan, I think the experience would be more effective if Mushu didn't speak. but still carry himself with a certain wisdom. That way, it's still the same character, but in a more realistic world, and we're not comparing him to Eddie Murphy. If we had to make him speak, which would take a lot of convincing, and we'd have to find the right way to do it, I think he should definitely be voiced by an Asian actor with a very distinctive, deep voice that looks like it could come out of a photorealistic dragon, and he definitely shouldn't be cracking jokes, but yeah, I think he should be silent, yet with personality still. As far as visuals go, this film needs to look huge, and epic, and stunning, and atmospheric. I'm gonna need cherry blossom trees galore, feathery snowfall hauntingly drifting about, grand Chinese landscapes and towering mountains. I want gorgeous, I want luscious, I want scope, I want melancholy. So many people claim the 2020 film to be epic and visually stunning, but I have to disagree. Some of the color grading was nice in the earlier scenes, but everything else was so lackluster, lifeless, and particularly the battle scenes had absolutely no cinematic value, and the animated film ended up being more epic than the live action. Anyway, yeah, just go fully in on the visuals and atmosphere. Okay, so now let's get into the story and how the film should be told. The most powerful message of Mulan's story that should really be highlighted is the idea of making sacrifices for the people you love. Not the message of being blindly loyal, brave, and true that the 2020 film preaches. It's giving military propaganda and it's gross. So yeah, in an ideal live-action version, Mulan would not be a natural-born, skilled warrior. In fact, I think she should be kind of a klutz, because that's what makes it so much more powerful when she decides to take her father's place in the army, even though she's unqualified and will likely not survive. It just shows the lengths she will go to protect her loved ones. That's her superpower. So the film would open on Mulan as a young child with her family during a huge Lunar New Year celebration at the Emperor's Palace. And in this one, we're gonna have her family be named the Fa family, like the animated version, rather than the Hua family, like the actual ballad, because we're trying to establish that this is the Disney-fied version of Mulan's story. This is not a direct historical telling of the tale, and by not claiming it to be a completely authentic translation of the ballad, and instead establishing that the film is inspired by the legend of the historical figure, then there's less room for criticism towards inaccuracies, and you can do what the best Disney live-action films do by not setting it in a specific time period, but blending elements of different eras and celebrating the entire history of Chinese culture in an ambiguously fantastical way. So yeah, the Fa family, which includes Mulan's mother, father, and grandmother. I don't see a need for a sister in this version. Yeah, they're celebrating the new year, and I think it should open on a musical sequence, because that way it's established right away that this is a musical film, rather than finding out later on and being caught off guard. In The New Little Mermaid, they don't have any songs until Ariel sings Part of Your World, and I understand the intent to anticipate the pivotal moment, but at that point we've already watched multiple scenes without singing, so it just comes out of nowhere when she breaks out into song. Let the audience know right away what they're getting into. We can have a ton of people at the celebration singing a new song written specifically for the film, or we can even have Chinese opera singers performing for the crowd, as they frequently do in these types of occasions. This also would make the Emperor not seem so detached from the people, and not like a total authoritarian fascist because we're supposed to actually like him. And even when the time comes where he has to build an army, I'd like to see him struggle with his position and the idea of making his people act as meat puppets and sacrifice their lives, but his advisors tell him that if they don't, everyone will be killed, and I'm getting ahead of myself. So, at the celebration, the Fa family is looking around in the crowd for Mulan, who has ventured off and is with a group of kids playing away from the crowd of people. It may not pan out exactly like this, and it would probably unfold in a more polished way, but this is just what I got off the top of my head, and it's the general gist of what should go down. Mulan is racing the other kids, and she beats some of them, but she can't run quite fast enough to beat all of them. One of the kids reveals a traditional Chinese yo-yo and says for the final race, whoever makes it to the end of the road will take home the toy. Mulan knows that some of the other kids are simply faster than her, so she has to think outside the box to succeed. She sees a horse tied up nearby, and after the race begins, we see her speed past all the other kids while riding the horse, being the first one to make it to the end of the road, and therefore winning. But a firecracker spooks the horse, and it goes wild, racing off through the crowd of people with Mulan still riding it. People leap out of the way, the horse knocks over some fireworks, and the fireworks launch towards the performers on the palace steps, but they dodge them. The horse eventually settles down after creating great chaos, and Mulan gets off of it on the palace steps in front of all the people. This moment would mirror the scene at the end of the film after Mulan saves China and everyone bows to her, but here they're just angry and in disgust at her. So when the triumphant moment at the end finally does happen, it hits even harder because it calls back to this disaster that is finally redeemed after so many years. But yeah, this sequence would establish so many things that would pay off as the film progresses. After the celebration, Mulan is with her father at the ancestral shrine to bring offerings to the ancestors. Mulan asks if the ancestors are disappointed in her, and her father tells her that she'll make mistakes, as all children do, but she'll eventually grow to be a respectable young lady. She asks him what will happen if she never stops making mistakes and won't ever be able to do anything right. Her father responds that the ancestors will always be looking out for her, and if she truly needs guidance, they'll send a guardian her way in the form of an animal like a tiger or a dragon. She asks if he ever had a guardian, and he tells her of his dragon that was by his side when he went to war. We flash forward to the young adult Mulan at the age she will be for the rest of the film. We see more of how she navigates her life through her cleverness and gets through the day-to-day duties by thinking outside the box. We see how she is kind of a klutz. We see her relationship with her parents and her grandma, and it's really sweet and cute, and we can feel the family's affection for one another. And then Mulan is informed of her meeting with the matchmaker, and we can see her light start to dim. We cut to the first appearance of the Huns attacking the Great Wall of China. No, we're not getting that pointless, silly witch character from the 2020 version. We get Shan Yu, a more developed, menacing, sinister, intimidating Shan Yu, who is just downright brutal and cruel. And he'll get a bit more backstory and a motive that isn't clunky or unnecessary. Now we're back to Mulan, who is preparing to get ready for the matchmaker. Mulan's grandma is not quite as goofy as she is in the cartoon, but she still adds some subtle comedic relief, mostly by having a bunch of superstitions she abides by, including having a pet cricket named Cricky, which is going to be more of a realistic cricket than the Cricky from the animated film. He won't be doing any unnatural expressions or anything. The Honor to a Soul sequence plays out, and it's definitely not a shot-for-shot recreation. It does its own more dramatic interpretation of it. And now I'll just kind of talk about the main points that need to be covered rather than walking through the entire thing, because really from here the film's story follows the animated version quite closely, but is approached in a more serious, complex, grounded, expanded manner. I really want to double down on the idea that Mulan isn't comfortable in her own skin and is a flawed individual. So that needs to be present in the reflection musical sequence, which I think should be longer. They could use the extended version that was cut from the animation or whatever new lyrics fit better, but this should be Mulan's I dreamed a dream moment where she truly is realizing that she is far from the respectable lady that her father told her she'd grow up to be, and she just keeps letting everyone down with her mistakes. I also think later on in the film there should be one or two reprises of reflection because it's the soul of the film. During the scene where Mulan decides to take her father's place in the army, it needs to be a climactic, epic, intense moment like in the animated film, and not the underwhelming blink and you'll miss it moment from the 2020 film. The music used in the animation during this scene is freaking awesome, and I'd love to see them do a hauntingly grand version of it sung by a choir. And she definitely needs to cut her hair with a sword because that is one of the most glorious cinematic moments ever. I know men in ancient China wore their hair as long as women, but like I said, this take on the story wouldn't be set in a specific time period, so it wouldn't have to be accurate to a particular time. So yeah, she's cutting that hair. In the very last moment before she heads out the door, the music goes quiet, and for a few moments she just stares at her family as if saying goodbye to them. Then the music kicks back in and she rides off into the stormy night. One thing I kind of liked from the 2020 novelization of Mulan is how it showed her struggles during the journey to the army camp after she left home, because it takes a few days to get to the camp. But that was mostly cut from the actual movie. I think we should see a bit of that here. Not too much, just her beginning to starve a bit, and when she's camping out in the rain overnight. That's when Mushu shows up and leads her to an apple tree she can eat from, and he sticks by her side for the rest of the film. The battle sequences, unlike in the lifeless 2020 film, are extravagant and breathtaking, and not too extreme in terms of violence, but still edgy for Disney, somewhere on the level of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. And though Mulan has picked up some fighting skills from training, she still isn't an expert warrior and has to use her cleverness as a means of defeating the Huns. Oh, and we need some romantic chemistry between Mulan and Shang before he realizes she's a woman, so we can really solidify him as a bi icon. And when it is finally revealed that Mulan is a woman in a very dramatic, emotional moment, Shang at first remains speechless and stunned while the Chancellor demands her to be executed. And when Shang finally does react, he doesn't just refuse her from being killed, but he recognizes Mulan's bravery and courage, and unlike the animated film where he gets pissy and just leaves her to survive on her own, he stands by her, as do Po, Yao, and Ling. Their automatic reaction is not disgust because they know that she's probably doing what she's doing for a reason, and since they think the Huns have been defeated, all the other soldiers who don't accept Mulan go their separate ways. And later that night, during the final act of the film, there's a parade at the palace due to the belief that the Huns have been defeated, and since Mulan can't reveal to anyone that she was a soldier, she just watches from the crowd as Shang and the rest of the gang are celebrated. She makes somber eye contact with Shang in particular, then takes her horse and begins to ride back home. But then she sees that some of the Huns, including Shan Yu, have survived. She goes to warn everyone, but it's too late. She has to act fast. She recalls the damage she did from the opening scene when she was a child and gets the idea to use fireworks. She launches them at the Huns as they approach the palace, taking some of them out. The crowd at the palace is unfazed by her shooting fireworks at the Huns because it's so loud and chaotic already. Mulan tries to light a large skyrocket, but it begins to rain, so she can't get a flame. The Huns approach closer and closer. It begins raining harder and harder, a huge storm that the crowd at the palace seems to embrace and dance around in. Just when the Huns get within touching distance of Mulan and one lifts his sword, Mushu moves in front of Mulan, and for the first time, he roars out a huge stream of fire that sets the attacker ablaze. Mulan is stunned and is like, "I didn't know you could do that. That would have been nice to know." Then she quickly grabs him, lights the skyrocket with his flaming breath, and runs towards the palace, telling Shang to get the Emperor to safety. The lit skyrocket gets knocked over by one of the Huns and is launched at the palace, blowing the entire roof off of the palace, leaving tons of rubble on fire and sending everyone into a frenzy. I want a huge chase/fight sequence throughout the hallways of the palace, and a final fight between Shan Yu and Mulan inside the palace with rain pouring down on them because the roof had been blown off. It's an epic, intense showdown, and Mulan is almost defeated as she's being choked by Shan Yu against the palace wall, but Mulan kicks the wall, which sends some debris down. She breaks free, runs around a corner, Shan Yu chases her, and when he runs around the same corner, she's just standing there with her sword pointed outward, so he runs into it, impaling him. They're face to face as he's taking his last breaths, and he calls her clever, saying something along the lines of how his men could have used some of that, or how that's the one fighting skill he overlooked, cleverness. And then he dies. The chill-inducing, triumphant scene where everyone bows down to Mulan happens while it's still drizzling a bit of rain, and then she declines the Emperor's offer to be part of his council, and as she's about to head home, Shang tells her he'd like to see her again, and she tells him to come by her village sometime so she can teach him how to, I don't know, something cute that she was able to do earlier in the film that he wasn't. Some kind of cute callback. On her journey home, she says goodbye to Mushu in the spot where she found him, and he disappears into the woods as she thanks her ancestors for sending him her way. I want the end scene to be her embracing her father as he says, "The greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter," which should be one of the very few lines of dialogue directly lifted from the animated film, because generally for a live action film, it's not a great idea to just recycle dialogue that was created specifically for an animated movie. You just end up constantly comparing the two versions that way, and certain things written for animation does not always work in live action, so yeah. But this line is so powerful it needs to stay. The film ends panning out on a wide shot of Mulan and her father surrounded by cherry blossom trees as a gorgeous choral version of Reflection swells. The end. Those are just ideas that can definitely be polished and expanded upon, but that's the vibe we're going for when it comes to the definitive live-action version of Disney's Mulan. There's so much potential here to create something truly spectacular that undeniably celebrates the animated film, but is viewed through a much more mature, dramatic lens, and therefore feels like a completely different experience. I'm curious what you wanted out of a live-action Mulan film. If you could do anything, what would you do? How would you approach it? I don't know, there are so many different things you can do, and yeah, what would you do? What are some specific sequences and elements you'd like to see? Let me know, okay? Love you. Well, some of you. Bye.